Whispers by the Haunted Lake. It was a moonless night, and the remote lakeside campground was shrouded in a thick, ghostly mist. Sarah and Mark, a young couple seeking a romantic getaway from the chaos of city life, had arrived earlier that day. They had expected serenity, the soothing sounds of lapping water, and the rustling of leaves under the starry sky. What they didn't expect was the creeping sense of dread that would soon engulf them. Their campsite was nestled beneath tall, gnarled trees, their branches reaching out like skeletal fingers. A feeble campfire flickered in the damp air, casting long, quivering shadows that danced across their faces. Sarah and Mark sat close, wrapped in blankets, their fingers intertwined, watching the inky waters of the lake. The night began quietly, and their laughter filled the chilly air as they reminisced about their shared adventures and future dreams. They marveled at the beauty of the lake and the isolation of their campsite, feeling as if they were the only souls for miles around. But then, as the clock's hands moved towards midnight, a change swept over the campground. The laughter died on their lips, replaced by an unsettling silence. "Did you hear that?" Sarah whispered, her eyes wide and searching the darkness beyond the campfire's glow. Mark frowned. "Hear what?" "Whispers," Sarah replied, her voice trembling. "I could swear I heard whispers coming from the lake." Mark strained his ears, and soon he heard them too, a faint, haunting murmur as if 100 voices from the past were carried on the breeze. It was the kind of sound that made the hair on the back of one's neck stand on end. "Maybe it's just the wind," Mark tried to reassure her, but he couldn't mask the unease in his voice. Sarah, however, was not convinced. She rose from her seat, drawn to the edge of the lake as if by an invisible force. Mark followed her, the mist swallowing them whole as they ventured closer to the water's edge. The whispers grew louder, more distinct, and now they seemed to take form, like fragmented memories reaching out from the depths. Sarah and Mark exchanged a wary glance before stepping cautiously into the water, guided by the eerie voices. As they waded further, the lake seemed to swallow them, the water growing darker and colder. It was as if they were descending into another world, a realm where time and space were twisted and tormented. Shadows moved beneath the surface, darting this way and that, eluding their gaze. In the heart of the lake, they stumbled upon something that sent shivers down their spines, a sunken rowboat, barely visible beneath the inky waters. As they approached, they saw the outline of a journal, its pages weathered and yellowed by age. Sarah reached down and gingerly retrieved the journal. Its cover was etched with strange, ancient symbols that seemed to shimmer in the faint moonlight. She opened it, revealing pages filled with cryptic writings, drawings of eerie figures, and accounts of long-forgotten rituals. "The journal," Sarah whispered, her voice quivering with fear. "It must hold the key to these whispers, to this place." Mark nodded, his eyes fixed on the journal. "We need to find out more. We can't leave now." Their curiosity turned into obsession as they pored over the journal, deciphering its cryptic contents. The more they read, the more they realized the chilling truth. They had stumbled upon a forgotten cult that had once thrived on the lake's shores, conducting dark rituals to summon otherworldly entities. The whispers, they learned, were the echoes of those long-dead cultists, trapped in a never-ending cycle of torment. And now, Sarah and Mark had unwittingly become part of that cycle. As the night wore on, the whispers grew louder, more insistent. The mist thickened around them, and the shadows in the water took shape, shadowy figures with elongated limbs and hollow eyes, beckoning them to join their spectral congregation. Sarah and Mark clung to each other, their terror mounting, but it was too late to turn back. The lake had claimed them, body and soul, and there was no escape from the darkness that surrounded them. Then, in a heart-stopping moment, the lake's surface erupted with a blinding light, and a ghostly figure, clad in tattered robes, emerged from the water. It was the vengeful spirit of the cult's leader, seeking retribution for the intrusion into their cursed domain. "Leave this place," the spirit hissed, its voice a chorus of tortured souls, "or join us in eternal torment." Sarah and Mark tried to flee, but the lake's icy grip held them fast. They watched in horror as the spirit extended its bony hand, reaching for their trembling souls. In that moment, they knew there was no escape. As the mist closed in around them, the whispers grew louder and more frantic, merging with their own terrified screams. The couple was pulled beneath the surface, their cries silenced as they became part of the lake's accursed choir. And so, the remote lakeside campground remained, its tranquility shattered by the restless spirits that dwelled beneath the surface. The whispers would continue to haunt the misty nights, a warning to all who dared to seek what lay hidden in the depths, the thin line between curiosity and danger, where the past came back to haunt the living. And the haunted journal, forever submerged in the inky waters, would bear witness to the never-ending nightmare, a testament to the relentless power of the supernatural, lurking just beneath the surface of our world. Whispers in the ancient woods. It was a night unlike any other, a foggy, moonless night that shrouded the dense, ancient forest in an eerie cloak of darkness. Among the towering trees and twisting underbrush, two figures moved cautiously, their steps muffled by the thick layer of fallen leaves. Jake, an experienced camper, led the way, his senses sharp and instincts honed by years of wilderness adventures. Beside him walked Lily, his adventurous younger sister, her wide eyes filled with excitement and trepidation. They had ventured deep into the heart of the forest, seeking an adventure that would test their courage and bond as siblings. What they didn't know was that this night would challenge them in ways they could never have imagined. The air was heavy with moisture, the fog clinging to their clothes like phantom fingers. The forest's nocturnal creatures stirred in the shadows, their rustlings and faint calls echoing through the trees. But there was something else, a sound that sent a chill down Jake's spine. "Do you hear that, Lily?" Jake asked, his voice low and tinged with unease. Lily paused, her eyes scanning the murky darkness. "What is it?" Whispers, soft, ghostly whispers, seemed to emanate from the very heart of the forest. They were elusive, like the echo of a long-forgotten conversation, yet unmistakably there. "I don't know," Jake muttered, his brow furrowing. "But we need to find out." With a shared look of curiosity and apprehension, they followed the whispers, guided by the haunting voices that seemed to lead them further into the labyrinthine depths of the woods. Each step they took led them deeper into the unknown, and the forest grew denser, the trees looming like ancient sentinels. As they ventured further, the world around them began to change. The trees seemed to warp and twist, their gnarled branches reaching out like skeletal fingers. The forest floor became uneven, causing them to stumble and lose their sense of direction. The whispers persisted, growing louder and more distinct, as if beckoning them to an otherworldly gathering. The siblings' unease deepened with each passing moment. "Jake, something's not right," Lily whispered, her voice trembling. Jake nodded, his eyes darting around, trying to discern their location. "I know, Lily. We shouldn't have followed those whispers." But it was too late to turn back. The forest had them in its grasp, and there was no escape from its tangled web of secrets. Hours passed, and the siblings became increasingly disoriented. The fog seemed to play tricks on their senses, distorting the world around them. The very ground beneath their feet appeared to shift and ripple like water, making it impossible to trust their own perception. And then, just as they thought they had lost all sense of direction, they stumbled upon it, the cursed tree. Its gnarled roots seemed to writhe like serpents, and its trunk was covered in etchings that told a sinister story, a story of a forgotten cult that had once thrived in these woods, conducting dark rituals to appease ancient, malevolent forces. The siblings approached the tree, their hearts pounding in their chests. The etchings seemed to come to life, glowing with an eerie, otherworldly light. They couldn't tear their eyes away from the symbols, which seemed to pulse and shift before their very eyes. As they reached out to touch the tree, the whispers grew deafening, swirling around them like a vortex of lost souls. It was then that they heard it, the agonized wail of a woman, a tormented cry that seemed to reverberate through their very bones. They turned, their hearts racing. And there, amid the ethereal mist, they saw her, a spectral figure, her form faint and wavering. Her eyes, filled with sorrow and despair, locked onto theirs. "Help me," she pleaded, her voice a haunting echo. "Help me escape this eternal torment." Tears welled up in Lily's eyes as she realized the truth. The forest was a prison, a realm where the spirits of those long-dead cultists were trapped in an endless cycle of suffering. Jake and Lily, overcome with empathy, reached out to the spectral figure, their fingers brushing against the cold, intangible mist. But they could do nothing to ease her suffering, nothing to free her from the curse that bound her. As they stood there, helpless, the whispers grew louder, more frantic, and the forest seemed to close in around them, its ancient trees closing ranks as if to protect its secrets. In a final, chilling revelation, the cursed tree's etchings shifted to form a warning of the price they would pay for their intrusion into the forest's dark past. With a sense of mounting horror, Jake and Lily realized the forest would not release them. They were now part of its grim history, doomed to join the spectral chorus that haunted the ancient woods. The whispers of the forest grew louder, their voices merging with the anguished cries of the tormented spirits. Jake and Lily's own voices joined the spectral choir, their screams lost in the eternal night. And so, the dense, ancient forest stood as a testament to the vulnerability of humanity in the face of nature's primal mysteries. It remained a place of eerie whispers, a warning to all who dared to venture into its depths, the power of the unknown, the inscrutable forces that lurked beneath the surface of our world. The cursed tree, its etchings forever shifting and changing, continued to guard its secrets, while the restless spirits of the past and the doomed siblings became a part of the ever-growing, ever-haunting legend of the ancient woods. The Haunting Diary of Campsite 13. The isolated campsite lay deep within the forest, a clearing surrounded by looming, shadowy trees that seemed to whisper secrets to anyone who dared to listen. Amy, Mike, and Lisa, a group of college friends, had ventured into the wilderness seeking adventure, unaware that the chilling tale of Campsite 13 would soon become their own. The evening sun cast long, eerie shadows as they set up their campfire. The forest seemed to close in around them, the trees standing sentinel like ancient guardians of a forgotten past. Excitement filled the air as they shared stories and laughter, unaware of the ominous destiny that awaited them. It was Amy who discovered it, a tattered diary hidden beneath a moss-covered rock. Its pages were weathered and yellowed with age, the cover adorned with cryptic symbols that sent shivers down their spine. "Look at this, guys," Amy exclaimed, her voice trembling. "It's an old diary. Maybe it'll tell us something about this place." With a sense of morbid curiosity, they gathered around the diary, its fragile pages revealing the dark history of Campsite 13. The diary belonged to a woman named Sarah, who had camped there many years ago. Her entries spoke of strange occurrences, whispers in the night, and an unsettling feeling that the forest was alive with malevolent forces. As they read, the forest seemed to grow darker, the rustling of leaves overhead taking on an ominous tone. Sarah's diary told of a forbidden ritual conducted by a cult that had once thrived in these woods, a ritual meant to summon otherworldly entities. She described the symbols they had carved into the trees, a mark of their allegiance to the dark forces. Lisa shivered, her eyes darting nervously between the trees. "We shouldn't be here. This place is cursed." But Mike dismissed her fears, his curiosity piqued. "Come on, guys, it's just an old diary. There's no such thing as curses." As night fell and the campfire crackled, the forest seemed to come alive with an eerie energy. Strange, otherworldly symbols began to appear on the trees surrounding their campsite, glowing with an unnatural light. The symbols shifted and danced, casting eerie shadows that danced in the flickering firelight. Tension hung in the air as the friends exchanged nervous glances. The forest whispered secrets to them, its chilling voices mingling with the echoes of Sarah's diary. It was as if the very trees were trying to communicate, warning them of the dark forces that still lingered. Suddenly, the campfire went out, plunging them into darkness. Panic set in as they fumbled for flashlights, their beams revealing the symbols etched into the trees with an eerie, malevolent glow. And then, they heard it, the sound of ghostly whispers, growing louder and more insistent. The forest seemed to come alive with unseen figures, shadows darting in and out of their flashlight beams. Amy's voice quivered as she whispered, "We have to leave, now." But before they could make their escape, a presence emerged from the darkness, a spectral figure, clad in tattered robes, its eyes hollow and filled with malevolence. It was the vengeful spirit of the cult's leader, seeking justice for the intrusion into their cursed domain. "Leave this place," the spirit hissed, its voice a chorus of tortured souls, "or face the consequences of your curiosity." Fear gripped them as they scrambled to their feet, fleeing into the forest in a blind panic. The whispers pursued them, echoing through the trees, and the symbols on the trees seemed to come to life, reaching out with spectral fingers. As they ran, they stumbled upon an ancient, decaying altar, a site where the cult had once conducted their forbidden rituals. The symbols on the altar pulsed with a sinister energy, and the air grew thick with dread. In their desperation, they attempted to appease the vengeful spirit, offering apologies for their intrusion and vowing to leave the forest forever. But the spirit was relentless, its hollow eyes fixed on them with an unyielding gaze. Their pleas fell on deaf ears as the forest itself seemed to close in around them, the very ground beneath their feet shifting and twisting. The symbols on the trees glowed brighter, and the whispers grew louder, a cacophony of torment and despair. With a final, bone-chilling wail, the vengeful spirit unleashed its wrath, and the forest erupted with blinding light. Shadows swirled around them, and they were pulled into an otherworldly vortex, their screams drowned out by the relentless voices of the past. And so, the isolated campsite remained, a haunting reminder of the consequences of past actions and the price of curiosity. The forest whispered its secrets to all who dared to enter, a warning that some knowledge is better left undiscovered. The diary of Sarah, forever bound to the cursed campsite, continued to tell the chilling tale of Campsite 13, a tale of dark rituals, malevolent forces, and the enduring power of the unknown. The symbols on the trees remained etched in the wood, a mark of the forest's ancient malevolence, a symbol that would continue to draw curious souls into its grasp, where the past and present merged in an eternal dance of terror. The Curse of Campsite 7. The remote campground lay shrouded in darkness, far removed from the comfort of civilization. David and Emily, a couple yearning for adventure, had embarked on a journey into the heart of the unknown. But little did they know that their desire for excitement would lead them to a place where the line between reality and horror blurred beyond recognition. The night sky above was eerily devoid of stars, as if the very heavens themselves had abandoned this forsaken place. The air was thick with an unsettling silence, broken only by the faint rustling of leaves and the distant murmur of a hidden stream. It was a silence that sent shivers down their spines, a silence that seemed to whisper of unspeakable secret. As David and Emily set up their campfire, They exchanged nervous glances. There was something about this place, something that felt undeniably wrong. Emily had heard tales of a curse that had plagued Campsite 7 for generations, stories of vengeful spirits seeking retribution for trespassing on sacred ground. But David, ever the skeptic, brushed off her concerns with a reassuring smile. There's no such thing as curses, Em. It's just local superstition. With a sense of trepidation, they settled in for the night, their campfire casting flickering shadows that danced like malevolent spirits in the inky darkness. The wind whispered through the trees, carrying with it sinister secrets and a foreboding sense of impending doom. As they huddled together, Emily couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. She glanced over her shoulder into the impenetrable darkness beyond the campfire's glow, her heart pounding with unease. It was then that she saw them, shadowy figures lurking just beyond the edge of their vision, their forms indistinct yet undeniably malevolent. David, Emily stammered, her voice quivering. There's something out there. I saw shadows. David's expression shifted from reassurance to concern as he peered into the darkness. But he saw nothing, only the silent, looming trees that seemed to close in around them. It's just your imagination playing tricks on you, he said, his voice a feeble attempt to dismiss her fear. But Emily was not convinced. She couldn't ignore the sinister whispers that seemed to carry on the wind, voices that spoke of long-forgotten sins and the pursuit of relentless justice. As the night wore on, the shadows grew bolder, their movements more deliberate. David and Emily tried to ignore them, focusing on their campfire as if it were a lifeline to the real world. But the shadows continued to encroach upon their sanctuary, their movements accompanied by an eerie, haunting laughter that sent shivers down their spines. With growing desperation, Emily pleaded with David to leave, to abandon Campsite 7 and its sinister history. But David, stubborn and unwilling to admit defeat, refused to yield to fear. And then, as the clock's hands inched toward midnight, the shadows coalesced into tangible forms, apparitions clad in tattered, ethereal robes. Their eyes burned with an unquenchable rage as they circled the campfire, their movements a sinister dance of malevolence. Emily's voice trembled as she whispered, "We have to leave, David. We're in danger." But before they could make their escape, a figure emerged from the darkness, a spectral entity that radiated an aura of dread. It was the spirit of the campsite's original guardian, the one who had invoked the curse that now haunted the land. "Leave this place," the spirit hissed, its voice a chorus of tormented souls, "or face the consequences of your trespass." David and Emily, their fear palpable, tried to flee, but the spectral entities closed in around them, their ethereal hands reaching out with a chilling touch. The sinister whispers grew louder, their voices a cacophony of rage and despair. In a desperate bid for survival, David and Emily stumbled upon an ancient, weathered stone altar, a site where the curse had been invoked centuries ago. The symbols etched into the stone pulsed with a malevolent energy, and the air grew thick with dread. Kneeling before the altar, they begged for mercy, their voices trembling with terror. But the spirits were unyielding, their hollow eyes fixed on the trespassers with an unwavering gaze. And then, in a final, horrifying revelation, the sinister whispers took form, rising from the shadows to engulf them. The spirits unleashed their wrath, and the world around them erupted with blinding light. Emily's screams joined the relentless chorus of the spirits, their voices merging in a symphony of torment. And so, the remote campground remained, a place of terror and unending darkness, a warning to all who dared to seek adventure in the face of the unknown. The curse of Campsite 7 lived on, a testament to the consequences of trespassing on sacred ground and the relentless pursuit of justice. The sinister whispers continued to carry on the wind, a haunting reminder of the darkness that dwelled in the heart of the forest. David and Emily's fate was sealed, their spirits forever bound to the cursed land, where the past and the present merged in an eternal dance of horror. The haunting howl of the wilderness, the secluded camping spot lay deep within the heart of the forest, a place where the world outside ceased to exist. Sarah, a nature enthusiast, had sought solace and communion with the wild, and she had brought her faithful companion, Max, a loyal and adventurous dog. Little did they know that their tranquil escape would soon become a nightmarish descent into the primal depths of fear. As the sun dipped below the horizon, the forest fell into an eerie silence, the stillness broken only by the occasional rustling of leaves and the soft breath of the wind. Sarah and Max had set up their campfire, its flickering flames casting long, wavering shadows that danced like spectral phantoms. They shared a sense of peace, the bond between human and animal palpable as they sat side by side, gazing into the depths of the wilderness. But that tranquility was shattered by a sound that sent shivers down their spines, a bone-chilling howl that seemed to emanate from the very heart of the woods. Max's ears perked up, his fur bristling with unease. Sarah's heart raced as she clutched her loyal companion. The howl was unlike anything she had ever heard, a mournful, anguished cry that echoed through the trees, filling the air with an aura of dread. "Did you hear that, Max?" Sarah whispered, her voice trembling. Max's eyes, filled with uncertainty, met hers, and he let out a low growl, his protective instincts kicking in. There was an intelligence in his gaze, a recognition that something was amiss in the woods. As the minutes passed, the forest remained shrouded in silence, the oppressive stillness hanging heavy in the air. Sarah and Max exchanged wary glances, unable to shake the sense of impending danger that loomed like a shadow in the night. And then it happened again. The howl, louder and more haunting than before, as if it were drawing closer. Max's behavior grew increasingly erratic, his growls turning into panicked whimpers. Sarah, her heart pounding with fear, strained her ears to listen. The howling was accompanied by a strange, rhythmic chanting, a chorus of voices that seemed to converge from all directions. The forest itself seemed to come alive with an otherworldly energy. "Max, we need to go," Sarah said, her voice trembling. But as they tried to pack up and leave, an oppressive force seemed to envelop them, holding them in place. Max's whimpers grew more desperate, his eyes darting frantically through the trees. Then, in a terrifying moment, the forest seemed to part, revealing a clearing illuminated by an eerie, ghostly light. Sarah and Max stood at the edge of the clearing, their eyes widening in terror as they beheld a nightmarish sight. A circle of ancient stones surrounded a decaying altar, a sight that reeked of dark rituals and the presence of malevolent forces. Sarah's breath caught in her throat as she saw the symbols etched into the stones, symbols that spoke of a long-forgotten cult that had once thrived in the heart of the forest. As the forest's unearthly voices grew louder, the symbols on the stones pulsed with an otherworldly energy, casting grotesque, shifting shadows that danced with unnatural life. The chanting reached a fevered pitch, and Sarah and Max found themselves at the mercy of a supernatural force. They watched in horror as a spectral figure emerged from the darkness, a vengeful spirit, clad in tattered robes, its eyes hollow and filled with malevolence. "Leave this place," the spirit hissed, its voice a chorus of tortured souls, "or join us in eternal torment." Sarah and Max, their fear overwhelming, tried to flee, but the supernatural force held them fast. The forest seemed to close in around them, its ancient trees closing ranks as if to protect its secrets. Desperate and trapped, they were unable to escape the relentless pursuit of the vengeful spirits. Max's whimpers turned to panicked barks as he tried to protect his beloved owner from the encroaching darkness. And then, in a final, terrifying revelation, the howling reached a crescendo, the night erupting with blinding light. Sarah and Max's world was torn asunder, their screams lost in the relentless voices of the forest. And so, the secluded camping spot remained, a place where the line between reality and the supernatural blurred beyond recognition. The haunting howl of the wilderness continued to echo through the woods, a warning to all who dared to seek adventure in the heart of the unknown, a warning of the vulnerability of humans in the wilderness, and the primal fear of the unknown. The ancient symbols etched into the rocks continued to bear witness to the horrors of that night, a testament to the relentless pursuit of justice by the vengeful spirits that dwelled in the depths of the forest. Sarah and Max were forever bound to the cursed land, where the past and the present merged in an eternal symphony of terror. The haunting of Whispering Pines. The deserted campground lay cloaked in darkness, the only illumination coming from the faint glow of the moon, struggling to penetrate the thick canopy of swaying pines. A group of friends, Alex, Sam, and Emma, had embarked on a camping trip seeking adventure, but they were about to stumble upon a chilling mystery that defied the boundaries of time and the living. The night was pitch black, and the silence of the deserted campground was oppressive, broken only by the occasional rustling of leaves and the haunting whisper of the wind through the towering pines. As they made their way through the labyrinthine woods, they stumbled upon an abandoned campsite, frozen in time like a relic from the past. Flickering lanterns hung from the surrounding trees, casting eerie, shifting shadows that danced like phantoms. The campfire lay unattended, its flames flickering in the eerie stillness of the night. But what sent shivers down their spines was the sense of déjà vu, the overwhelming feeling that they had been here before in another lifetime. "This is strange," Sam muttered, his voice trembling. Emma nodded, her gaze fixed on the eerie campsite. "It's like we've walked into a different time." Alex, ever the skeptic, tried to dismiss their unease. "Come on, guys, it's probably just some old campsite that someone forgot to clean up." But the air was charged with an otherworldly energy, and the friends couldn't shake the feeling that something was profoundly wrong. As they explored the campsite further, they stumbled upon a journal, its pages yellowed with age but filled with entries that seemed to have been written moments ago. The journal spoke of the campers' joyous arrival at Whispering Pines, their laughter and camaraderie by the campfire, and their plans for a weekend filled with adventure. But as the friends read on, the entries grew increasingly ominous, describing strange occurrences, flickering lanterns, whispered voices in the night, and a deep sense of dread that settled over the campsite. Emma's voice quivered as she read aloud. "It's like they were living our exact experience." Alex scoffed, trying to maintain his composure. "It's just a weird coincidence. People have similar camping trips all the time." But the atmosphere around them seemed to thicken, and the lanterns began to flicker more erratically, casting eerie shadows that danced like restless spirits. As the friends sat around the campfire, they were overwhelmed by a sense of déjà vu that grew stronger with each passing moment. The air grew colder, and the forest seemed to come alive with spectral whispers, a chorus of voices that spoke of long-forgotten stories and the persistence of the past. And then it happened, an unearthly howl that echoed through the trees, freezing their blood in their veins. The spectral vision of the campers came to life before their eyes, their laughter turning to anguished screams as they relived a night of terror. The friends watched in horror as the campers were consumed by a darkness that seemed to rise from the very earth beneath them, their faces contorted in agony, their voices a chorus of despair as they were pulled into an abyss that defied comprehension. "Run!" Sam screamed, his voice filled with terror. But the campground had become a prison, a place where the past and present merged in an eternal dance of horror. The spectral campers turned toward Alex, Sam, and Emma with hollow eyes, their arms outstretched in a relentless pursuit. With desperation gripping their hearts, the friends fled through the labyrinthine woods, their footsteps echoing the terror of those who had come before them. The ghostly campers pursued them with an unearthly determination, their howls of despair echoing through the night. As they ran, they stumbled upon an ancient, weathered altar, a site of dark rituals where the campers had once sought to commune with the spirits of the forest. The symbols etched into the stone pulsed with a malevolent energy, and the air grew thick with dread. Desperation gave way to a frantic plea for mercy as the friends knelt before the altar, their voices trembling with terror. But the spectral campers were unyielding, their hollow eyes fixed on the trespassers with an unwavering gaze. And then, in a final, horrifying revelation, the campers unleashed their wrath, and the forest erupted with blinding light. The world around them shattered, and the spectral vision of the past swallowed them whole, their screams lost in the relentless voices of the campground. And so, Whispering Pines remained a place of haunting mystery, where the past lingered like an eternal specter, and the veil between the living and the dead was thin. The journal, forever bound to the cursed campground, continued to tell the chilling tale of the phantom campers, a tale of déjà vu and the relentless persistence of the past. The flickering lanterns continued to cast eerie shadows that danced like restless spirits, a haunting reminder of the friends' harrowing encounter with the spectral campers. Their fate was sealed, their spirits forever bound to the campground, where the past and the present merged in an eternal symphony of terror. The Curse of the Unseen Waters. The remote campsite lay in the shadow of a cursed, stagnant pond, its inky surface reflecting the cloudy night sky like a dark mirror. Tom and Lisa, a couple with an insatiable curiosity for the supernatural, had ventured into the wilderness seeking to quench their thirst for the unknown. Little did they know that their fascination would unleash a malevolent force that defied comprehension. The cloudy night hung heavy with foreboding as they set up their campsite, the air filled with a palpable tension that seemed to emanate from the cursed pond. The very water itself appeared to pulse with an unnatural darkness, a presence that clawed at the edges of their senses. Tom and Lisa had always been drawn to the occult, their fascination with the supernatural leading them down a path of danger and discovery. As they sat beside their campfire, the flickering flames cast eerie shadows that danced like phantoms, their faces reflecting a mixture of trepidation and excitement. Lisa's eyes gleamed with curiosity as she pulled an old book from her backpack, its pages filled with cryptic symbols and incantations. "This is it, Tom. The ritual we've been searching for. The one that will unlock the secrets of this cursed place." Tom, ever the skeptic, hesitated. "Are you sure about this, Lisa? We don't know what we're dealing with." But Lisa's determination was unwavering, and she proceeded with the forbidden ritual, a chant that called upon the spirits that dwelled within the cursed pond. The very air seemed to thicken as the incantation filled the night, and the pond responded with ripples that defied explanation. As the last words of the incantation left Lisa's lips, a profound stillness fell over the campsite, as if the very forest held its breath. The clouds above seemed to part, revealing a pale, sickly moon that cast an eerie glow over the pond. And then, it happened. A spectral figure rose from the depths of the pond, its form ethereal and menacing. It was a spirit bound by centuries of anguish, its eyes hollow and filled with malevolence. "Who dares awaken me?" the spirit hissed, its voice a chilling whisper that sent shivers down Tom and Lisa's spines. Fear gripped them as they realized the magnitude of their mistake. They had meddled with forces far beyond their understanding, and the consequences were about to unfold. The malevolent spirit's form twisted and contorted as it surged towards them, its spectral fingers reaching out with a deathly touch. Tom and Lisa, their hearts pounding with terror, tried to flee, but an unseen force held them in place. As the spirit drew closer, the cursed pond itself seemed to come alive, its inky waters rising like a malevolent wave. The very air became charged with an otherworldly energy, and unsettling whispers began to rise from the depths, a cacophony of despair and torment. Desperation gave way to a frantic plea for mercy as Tom and Lisa knelt before the cursed pond, their voices trembling with terror. but the malevolent spirit was unyielding, its hollow eyes fixed on the trespassers with an unwavering gaze. And then, in a final, horrifying revelation, the cursed pond unleashed its wrath. Tom and Lisa were engulfed by a darkness so profound that it seemed to consume their very souls. Their screams were lost in the relentless voices of the pond, their bodies disappearing into the inky depths. And so, the remote campsite remained, a place of malevolence and despair, a testament to the consequences of meddling with the supernatural. The book of forbidden rituals lay abandoned, its pages filled with warnings that had gone unheeded. The cursed pond continued to reflect the cloudy night sky, its surface a dark mirror that concealed the malevolent spirit within. The unsettling whispers that rose from its depths were a haunting reminder of the folly of Tom and Lisa, a warning to all who dared to seek the unknown. The consequences of their actions had become an eternal curse, a price paid in blood and anguish. The cursed pond held their souls in eternal torment, where the past and the present merged in an eternal symphony of horror. The Echoes of Abandonment. The derelict campground lay shrouded in thick fog, its crumbling remains a haunting testament to a past long forgotten. Rachel and her group of urban explorers had embarked on a journey into the unknown, drawn by the allure of an abandoned campsite with a chilling mystery that begged to be unraveled. The fog clung to the skeletal trees like a shroud, obscuring the campsite's decaying structures and casting an eerie pallor over the desolation. Rachel, her heart pounding with anticipation, led the way as they ventured deeper into the abandoned campground. The tents, weathered and crumbling, stood like silent sentinels of a bygone era, their fabric sagging under the weight of years of neglect. Forgotten belongings lay scattered about, as if their owners had vanished into thin air. It was as though time itself had come to a standstill in this forsaken place. As Rachel's group explored the campsite, a sense of disquiet settled over them like a weight on their chests. The very air seemed to thicken with the silence of abandonment, broken only by the muffled sounds of their footsteps on the damp ground. "Can you feel it?" Rachel whispered to her companions, her voice trembling. They nodded in unison, a sense of claustrophobia closing in around them. It was as if the campsite itself were watching, waiting to reveal its chilling secrets. As they continued their exploration, they stumbled upon a diary, its pages yellowed with age but filled with entries that told a haunting tale. The diary spoke of a group of campers who had arrived at the site with high spirits and a sense of camaraderie. But as they settled in, the entries grew increasingly ominous, describing strange occurrences, whispers in the night, flickering lanterns, and a deep sense of unease that settled over the campsite like a shroud. Rachel's voice quivered as she read aloud. They sensed something lurking in the fog, something that refused to reveal itself. The fog outside the tents grew thicker, as if the very air were closing in around them. It was as though the campsite itself were alive, its past a dark presence that refused to be forgotten. As night fell and the fog thickened, the group huddled together, their sense of unease growing with each passing moment. The lanterns they had brought cast feeble glows that barely pierced the gloom, and the fog outside seemed to swallow the campsite whole. And then it happened, an eerie, otherworldly howl that echoed through the fog, freezing their blood in their veins. The fog itself seemed to come alive, twisting and writhing as if possessed by a malevolent force. Fear gripped them as they realized that the echoes of the past were returning, and the horrors of abandonment were about to resurface. The very ground beneath them trembled, and the fog grew thicker, obscuring their vision until they could barely see their own hands. Rachel's heart pounded as she clutched the diary, the entries describing the campers' descent into madness as they were stalked by an unseen presence. It was a presence that now seemed to encircle them, its malevolence palpable. Desperation gave way to a frantic plea for escape as the group tried to flee the campsite. But the fog had become an impenetrable barrier. The howling grew louder, its source unseen but undeniably malevolent. As they ran, the fog seemed to twist and contort around them, its fingers reaching out with a deathly touch. The campsite itself became a labyrinth of despair, a place where the past and present merged in an eternal dance of horror. And then, in a final, horrifying revelation, the fog unleashed its wrath. Rachel and her companions were engulfed by a darkness so profound that it seemed to consume their very souls. Their screams were lost in the relentless howling of the fog, their bodies disappearing into the suffocating embrace of the campsite's abandonment. And so, the derelict campground remained, a place of isolation and despair, where the echoes of abandonment lingered like a curse. The diary, forever bound to the forsaken site, continued to tell the chilling tale of those who had ventured into the fog, a tale of isolation and the lingering scars of the past. The fog, thick and suffocating, continued to envelop the abandoned campsite, its tendrils reaching out like malevolent fingers. The horrors of the past were etched into the very fabric of the fog, a warning to all who dared to seek answers in the depths of the unknown. The consequences of their curiosity had become an eternal curse, a price paid in the isolation and despair of the abandoned campground. Rachel and her companions were forever bound to the fog, where the past and the present merged in an eternal symphony of terror. The whispers in the night, the dense forest, its ancient trees reaching toward the heavens like spectral giants, lay cloaked in darkness on a stormy, moonless night. Mark and Sophie, along with their group of intrepid hikers, had embarked on an adventure into the unknown, but little did they know that the heart of the forest held secrets more horrifying than their wildest nightmares. The storm raged overhead, the sound of raindrops pummeling the leaves like an ominous drumbeat. Mark and Sophie, their determination unwavering, led the way as they ventured deeper into the labyrinthine forest. The trees loomed like silent sentinels, their branches reaching out like skeletal fingers. As the group pressed on, they began to hear sinister whispers, an eerie chorus of voices that seemed to emanate from the very heart of the forest. The whispers were faint at first, like distant echoes of a forgotten past, but they grew louder and more insistent with each step. "Did you hear that?" Sophie asked, her voice trembling. Mark nodded, his heart pounding with unease. "It's like the forest is trying to tell us something." The whispers seemed to beckon them deeper into the woods, drawing them in like moths to a flame. The group followed, unable to resist the allure of the unknown. It was as though the very forest itself had come alive, its secrets calling out to them in a language they could not comprehend. The twisted, contorted trees that surrounded them seemed to watch with malevolent intent, their gnarled branches casting eerie shadows that danced like specters. The forest itself had become a living, breathing entity, and the hikers were its unwitting prey. As they ventured deeper, the storm grew fiercer, the rain pelting them relentlessly as if the very elements were conspiring to keep them within the forest's grasp. The whispers, now a cacophony of voices, filled the air with an oppressive sense of dread. The group began to lose their way, the labyrinthine forest closing in around them like a suffocating nightmare. Panic gave way to frantic desperation as they tried to retrace their steps. But the forest seemed to shift and change, its paths twisting and contorting like a living maze. And then, in a horrifying moment, they realized they were not alone. A malevolent force lurked in the shadows, its presence felt but unseen. It was a relentless pursuer, a predator that seemed to revel in their fear. The whispers, now a tormenting chorus, seemed to converge on them, drowning out all other sound. The forest itself seemed to close in around them, the trees leaning in like predators ready to pounce. Sophie's voice trembled as she cried out, "We have to get out of here." But the forest was relentless, its grip unyielding. The group ran, their footsteps echoing the terror of those who had come before them. The relentless force pursued them with an otherworldly determination, its presence a shadowy specter that seemed to be everywhere and nowhere at once. As they fled, the forest seemed to come alive with unnatural energy. The very trees themselves seemed to twist and contort, their branches reaching out like skeletal arms to ensnare them. The whispers grew louder, their voices a cacophony of despair and torment. And then, in a final, horrifying revelation, the malevolent force revealed itself, a spectral entity that defied comprehension. Its form twisted and contorted, its eyes hollow and filled with malevolence. "You are mine," it hissed, its voice a chorus of tortured souls. Desperation gave way to a frantic plea for mercy as the group knelt before the malevolent force, their voices trembling with terror. But the entity was unyielding, its hollow eyes fixed on the trespassers with an unwavering gaze. And then, in a blinding flash of lightning, the forest erupted with a deafening roar. Mark and Sophie's world was torn asunder, their screams lost in the relentless voices of the forest. And so, the dense forest remained, a place of inescapable dread and unspeakable horror. The whispers continued to echo through the woods, a warning to all who dared to seek adventure in the heart of the unknown, a warning of the power of nature's secrets and the consequences of venturing too far. The twisted, contorted trees continued to watch with malevolent intent, their branches reaching out like skeletal fingers. Mark and Sophie were forever bound to the forest, where the past and the present merged in an eternal symphony of terror. The timeless echoes, the isolated campsite sat under a starless sky, its haunting silence broken only by the murmur of a flickering campfire. Michael, Kate, James, and their group of friends had embarked on a camping trip seeking adventure, but they were about to experience a nightmarish journey into the very fabric of time itself. The stars, usually a celestial tapestry above, were absent, as though the very universe itself had withdrawn from this forsaken place. The campfire flickered, its flames casting eerie shadows that danced like spectral apparitions. The air was heavy with an otherworldly stillness, and the friends huddled together, their excitement tinged with unease. As they sat around the campfire, a sense of temporal dislocation washed over them, as if the very world around them were shifting and changing. Time seemed to lose its meaning, and they couldn't shake the feeling that something was profoundly wrong. Michael, the group's natural leader, was the first to speak, his voice trembling with uncertainty. "Did anyone else feel that? It's like time is unraveling." Kate nodded, her eyes filled with apprehension. "I thought I saw something ... or someone, just beyond the firelight. But when I looked again, there was nothing there." James, ever the skeptic, tried to dismiss their unease. "It's just our imagination playing tricks on us. We're in the middle of nowhere, after all." but the air was charged with an otherworldly energy, and the campfire seemed to defy logic and time, its flames flickering in a rhythm that defied comprehension. As they continued to sit by the fire, the very fabric of reality seemed to shift. The friends found themselves caught in repeating loops of time, as if they were trapped in a never-ending cycle of déjà vu. They would hear the crackling of the campfire, then the sound of their own voices speaking the same words over and over again. It was as though the echoes of the past were resurfacing, haunting the campsite with their relentless persistence. Michael's voice echoed through time as he said, "I thought I saw something ... or someone just beyond the firelight." Kate's words were an eerie repetition, but when I looked again, there was nothing there. James's skepticism echoed through the night. "It's just our imagination playing tricks on us." The friends were caught in a nightmarish loop, their actions and words repeating like a macabre record stuck in a never-ending groove. They tried to break free, to escape the relentless cycle, but each attempt only led them back to the same moment, as if time itself were a prison from which they could not escape. As the night wore on, the campfire's flickering flames seemed to dance with a malevolent intent. The friends felt as though they were being watched, not by the living, but by the echoes of past campers who had experienced the same haunting cycle. And then, in a horrifying revelation, the residual spirits of previous campers began to materialize around them, their forms ethereal and menacing. They were trapped in a never-ending nightmare, their faces twisted in terror as they relived the same moments over and over again. The friends tried to speak to them, to offer comfort and assistance, but the spirits were trapped in their own torment, unable to hear or comprehend. They were caught in a never-ending cycle of terror, their existence a haunting reminder of the relentless persistence of the past. Desperation gave way to a frantic attempt to break free from the haunting cycle. Michael, Kate, and James ran from the campsite, their footsteps echoing the terror of those who had come before them. But each path they took only led them back to the same moment, as if the forest itself conspired to keep them trapped. As the campfire's flames continued to flicker with malevolence, the friends realized that they were powerless to escape the relentless echoes of the past. The very fabric of time seemed to unravel around them, and they were caught in an eternal symphony of terror. And then, in a final, horrifying revelation, the campsite itself seemed to come alive with an otherworldly energy. The trees swayed in a sinister dance, their branches reaching out like skeletal arms to ensnare them. The air was filled with a cacophony of voices, the echoes of past campers crying out in despair. Michael, Kate, and James were engulfed by a darkness so profound that it seemed to consume their very souls. Their screams were lost in the relentless voices of the campsite, their bodies disappearing into the never-ending cycle of time. And so, the isolated campsite remained, a place of haunting echoes and eternal torment. The campfire continued to flicker with malevolence, its flames a reminder of the friends who had ventured into the timeless abyss. The consequences of their curiosity had become an eternal curse, a price paid in the haunting echoes of the campsite. Michael, Kate, and James were forever bound to the relentless cycle of time, where the past and the present merged in an eternal symphony of terror.